Welcome. You've entered a quiet space where history whispers and time slows, where the flicker of oil lamps casts long shadows and footsteps echo softly on temple stone. Tonight, we meet a woman who is rarely spoken of, but who watched, waited, and witnessed. Her name was Anna, an elderly prophetess tucked into the corners of the temple in Jerusalem, a woman whose presence shaped no empires, but whose gaze fell on something the world had long awaited. She saw the Messiah not as a king, not as a conqueror, but as an infant wrapped in linen, held in his mother's arms, stillness surrounded by stillness. In this episode, we will walk slowly through Anna's world. We'll begin with the daily life of a woman devoted to prayer. Then we'll follow the path of her long years, her loss, her waiting, her revelation. We'll explore the mysteries of the Second Temple, the sacred roles of women, and the quiet power of prophecy. And finally, we'll lift our gaze to the contrast between worldly glory and the soft glow of sacred devotion. Let your breath soften, let the world fade, and allow yourself to rest in sacred silence. As we begin with life in the temple courts, daily life in the temple courts, imagine yourself in Jerusalem. The sun has just begun to rise, casting pale gold across the rooftops of the ancient city. The streets are still, but the temple begins to stir. Soft prayers drift like incense on the breeze. Stone steps echo with the quiet shuffle of sandals. Vendors in the outer courts begin arranging baskets of doves, flour, and oil for sacrifice. A new day is beginning in the house of the Lord. You are walking toward the temple, not as a priest, not as a pilgrim, but as one who lives in its shadow, a watcher, a witness. This is Anna's world. She is old now, her back curved by time, her hands folded in reverence. But every morning, she is among the first to arrive. Wrapped in a simple robe, perhaps gray with age, tied with a plain sash. Her face, lined with years, holds the kind of calm that only comes from decades of waiting. Anna lived in the courts, not in the Holy of Holies, where only the high priest entered once a year, not even in the inner courts, reserved for men and sacrifice. But along the edge near the court of women, the place where lamps were lit and stories lingered, she lived a rhythm of silence, prayer at dawn, worship through the afternoon, fasting when others feasted, sitting when others passed by. The temple itself was alive. You could hear its breath in the murmurs of the Levites, the scrape of incense bowls, the rustle of scrolls unrolling, the flutter of birds waiting to be offered. There was always motion, but in the corners. There was stillness, and it was there that Anna dwelled. No one paid much attention to her. She was not rich. She held no title. She did not speak loudly or demand space, but she was present. Every day, like the steady drip of water against stone, she carved out space with her faith. Not by force, but by remaining. She likely swept the floor where she sat, folded her own worn blanket, kept a small flask of oil for her lamp, and day after day, she watched. She saw children grow, wives come and go, priests age and retire. The seasons passed and still Anna remained. For many, the temple was a place of pilgrimage. For Anna, it was home. She was known not by her wealth, but by her waiting. She did not retire from hope. She remained anchored in the sacred rhythm of prayer and presence. The sounds of daily life surrounded her, goats bleating, temple coins clinking, sandals on stone. But within, she held a stillness deeper than sound. A stillness that had room to notice, to listen, to receive. And so, while the world bustled past, Anna watched. She didn't know when the promise would arrive. She only knew how to remain. Biography, her long waiting, and the moment of revelation Anna's life, like so many women of her time, began within the familiar script of expectation. She married young, likely just a girl, when she was given in marriage. 7 years. That was all the time she had with her husband before he died. 7 quiet years of shared meals, shared prayers, shared silence. And then nothing. A sudden stillness. In those days, widowhood was not only a personal grief, it was a social sentence. A woman without a husband was often without protection, without status, without voice. But Anna chose something different. She could have remarried. She could have returned to her family's home. She could have faded into the fabric of the village, like many others. But instead, she went to the temple. Not just to pray, though she did. Not just to worship, though she never stopped. But to dwell, to live. In the very place where the presence of God was believed to rest. Luke tells us she was a prophetess, one of the few women in all of Scripture given that title. Not because she stood in crowds or led armies, but because she listened for decades. She fasted, she prayed, she waited, and one day, after all that waiting, she saw him. A poor couple entered the temple holding a baby. They did not look like royalty. They didn't carry gold or scrolls or signs. But Anna knew this child was different. She may have heard Simeon bless the boy, declaring him a light for the Gentiles and the glory of Israel. Or perhaps she simply felt it, that quiet ripple in the air, the hush of heaven meeting earth. She approached the child, not with entitlement, but with reverence. Her hands, weathered by time, likely trembled. Her voice, worn by years of silence, may have cracked. But in that moment, Anna saw the promise. She had waited not in vain. She had endured not in obscurity. She had stayed long enough to see. Her story is told in only 3 verses, but within those verses is a lifetime of faith. Anna praised God. She spoke to all who looked for redemption in Jerusalem. She became a witness. Not to a miracle, but to a child. Not to power, but to promise. She didn't need proof. She didn't need a throne or thunder. For Anna, the face of the Messiah was enough. Mystery, prophetic sight, sacred silence, and hidden light. The mystery of Anna is not in her words few were recorded, nor in her deeds. She did not part seas or call down fire. Her mystery lies in her stillness, in her waiting, in the quiet discipline of devotion without recognition. Prophecy in her day was often thought of as thunderous, like Elijah's fire or Moses' law. But Anna reminds us That prophecy can also whisper, it can wait, it can simply see what others miss. She was not in the court of kings, nor the scrolls of the prophets, but she was in the temple, and she was watching how many people walked by that child. How many scribes and priests, too busy or too blind, missed the moment? But Anna, through years of prayer, fasting, silence, had tuned her spirit. She did not just know what to look for, she knew how to recognize presence. There's a hidden power in her story. A woman, old, widowed, largely invisible to society, who became the first prophetess to declare the Messiah after his birth. And she didn't do it from a stage or scroll. She did it in passing, in presence. It is easy to miss the significance of this mystery, but think of it. The divine revealed itself not in thunder or spectacle, but in the arms of a poor couple, and witnessed by a woman most had likely forgotten. There is something sacred about this quiet unveiling. It echoes the God who hides treasure in the ordinary, the God who plants kings in mangers and prophets in widows. Anna's vision was not flashy, it was faithful. She had seen sorrow, she had known silence, and yet she remained attuned to hope. In the Jewish tradition, to wait on the Lord is not passive. It is active faith, watching, worshiping, whispering prayers in the dark. That is the mystery Anna embodies. Not the power to predict, but the ability to perceive. She saw the redemption not as a conquering king, but as a newborn child. She knew the sound of God's movement, even when others heard nothing. This is not the kind of story we expect from prophets. And yet, it is perhaps the most prophetic of all. For in a world that demands signs and wonders, Anna shows us the miracle of presence, the holiness of holding on, the mystery of a life lived in anticipation of glory. Contrast, Anna and the priests, power and presence, the seen and the unseen. The temple was filled with men of importance, Pharisees in flowing robes, scribes with scrolls and ink-stained fingers, priests who knew every word of the law. They held power, political, spiritual, social. They were seen, respected, named. Anna was none of those things. She was a woman, a widow, old, and largely invisible. She didn't hold the scrolls. She wasn't invited to the courts of scholars. She likely wasn't even acknowledged by most who passed her by. But when divinity entered the temple, not in fire or cloud, but as a baby carried by weary parents, it was she who recognized him, not the priests, not the scholars, not the men with titles and tassels. Anna, in her silent watchfulness, had more spiritual sight than those with power. This is the contrast that hums beneath her story. She had no influence, and yet she saw. The priests offered ritual. Anna offered recognition. They recited prophecy. She fulfilled it. In her presence, the veil thinned, if only for a moment. She did not just speak of redemption. She saw it. The powerful were looking for a Messiah of grandeur, one to overthrow Rome, to restore Israel with might. But Anna saw a different kind of Messiah, one wrapped in linen, carried, not commanding, holy, but hidden. It was a reversal of everything expected. the contrast between what is loud and what is true, between those who declare and those who discern. In her waiting, she became a mirror reflecting the contrast of God's ways. The first shall be last. The meek shall inherit the earth. The kingdom is given to children and those who notice them. Anna was not celebrated in her time, but she became part of a story that outlived every name on the temple scrolls. She reminds us God often chooses the unseen, the ones in the corner, the ones who stayed, the ones who watched and waited.